alone. A cholera epidemic only worsens the situation, with 5,300 cases and 115 deaths. The Security Council, which plans to visit South Sudan next week, is outraged at the recent attacks targeting civilians and humanitarian personnel, and underscored that such attacks may constitute war crimes. Peace talks between South Sudan's government and rebel fighters in Ethiopia were resumed on Monday with the aim of creating a transitional government, but they have yet to yield any breakthroughs following fresh clashes along the South Sudan border. Now, for more on this, I'm being joined live now on The World Today by the Voice of America's John Tanza, and he is going to speak to us about the situation from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us on the program again, John. Now, where do things stand right now concerning South Sudan?
Well, the talks are going on in Addis Ababa, but yesterday there was a little bit of a hiccup. The rebels walked out of the talks because, according to them, they wanted to speak directly to the government delegation as opposed to speaking to everybody on the round table, because as it is now, there are several representatives at the talks. You have the civil society, you have delegates from political parties in South Sudan, you have faith-based groups. So the rebels are saying we cannot speak to everybody. We want to speak to the government directly first before everybody can be on the table. But as of today, we understand the rebels are back at the negotiation table and things are moving on well. But we don't know what the progress is.
Now, where does the move by Mashar's side leave the peace talks at the moment right now?
Well, that move on Tuesday was a typical behavior at negotiation table. You know, people disagree and they come back. But the move by Machar's group to walk out did not affect the talks, because as the two parties are at the table, they are talking about modalities of the ceasefire. They are looking at the metrics of the permanent ceasefire. So the talks are going on despite that hiccup on Tuesday.
Where does South Sudan go from here right now?
Well, from here, South Sudan has to move towards peace, because the whole country is affected by the fighting that erupted in Juba in mid-December. There is a looming humanitarian disaster. The UN has already raised alarm. In fact, yesterday, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said he is very disturbed by conditions on the ground in South Sudan. They are evacuating aid workers from Upper Nile State. From Monday, there were close to 5 aid workers who were killed by a new militia group calling themselves Mabanese Defense Force. So the situation is really, really very worrying. So these peace talks is the final, if you like, final solution to South Sudan's problems.
Well, thank you so much, John. I've been speaking with the Voice of America's John Tanza, and he's the co-host of the South Sudan in Focus program. Well, in other news, militants with suspected ties to Nigerian Islamist group Boko Haram have killed 10 people in a raid on a remote village in North Cameroon. 9 bus passengers and a soldier were shot dead after coming face to face with heavily armed militants in Zigagwe. The son of a local chief was kidnapped in the attack, and also there have been a lot of cross-border raids into Cameroon in recent weeks. Now, the Cameroonian president, that's Paul Biya, has sacked 2 senior army officers at the forefront of the battle against Islamist militants last week, and that decision came just days after the deputy prime minister's wife was abducted by militants from the northern town of Kologata, along with her maid, that was a religious leader, and the local mayor. Militants have also kidnapped foreign nationals in northern Cameroon before, including a French family and Chinese workers. To some more cheery news now. The U.S. President Barack Obama has hailed a new emerging Africa on the last day of a summit in Washington, D.C. with 51 African leaders. Yesterday's talks covered security concerns and corruption, and those are two areas the U.S. administration says are holding back growth and investment in Africa. Now, U.S. firms pledged $50 billion worth in investment during the summit. And while closing the summit, Mr. Obama said the leaders had held genuine discussions and pledged to hold another gathering.
The summit reflects the reality that even as Africa continues to face great challenges, we're also seeing the emergence of a new, more prosperous Africa. Africa's progress is being led by Africans, including leaders here today. I want to take this opportunity again to thank my fellow leaders for being here. Rather than a lot of prepared speeches, our sessions today were genuine discussions, a chance to truly listen and to try to come together around some pragmatic steps that we can take together. And that's what we've done this week. First, we made important progress in expanding our trade. The $33 billion in new trade and investments that I announced yesterday will help spur African development and support tens of thousands of American jobs. With major new commitments to our Power Africa initiative, we've tripled our goal and now aim to bring electricity to 60 million African homes and businesses. And today I reiterated that we'll continue to work with Congress to achieve a seamless and long-term renewal of the African Growth and Opportunity Act.
U.S. President Barack Obama. Well, still with us on The World today. When we return, we take a look at stories making rounds outside of the African continent. And Russia extends the whistleblower Edward Snowden's residency. We'll have details for you shortly. Please stay with us.
In a warming world, there could be an even greater threat of extreme weather than previously thought. Every Friday, Channels takes you on a journey to see the effect of human activities on our changing planet. It's a fact that we've been talking the talk. Learn how to take the step on Earth 5 at this time on Channels Television.
Many thanks for staying with us. You're still watching The World today on Channels Television. Now, as the violence in Iraq continues, Christians there are even at more risk, as a quarter of them are said to be fleeing after Islamic militants seized the minority's biggest town in the country. The Islamic State group captured Karakosh in the province overnight after the withdrawal of Kurdish forces. And meanwhile, the UN says some of the 50,000 members of the Yazidi religious minority trapped is on Mount Sinjar, and they've been rescued. And that controls parts of Iraq and Syria and says it's created an Islamic State. Now, we'll bring you more details on that story as we get them. Well, in what could be considered as an attempt to clap back at the United States for sanctions imposed over Ukraine, Russia has granted fugitive U.S. whistleblower Edward Snowden permission to stay 3 more years with the right to travel abroad. This came after his year-long stay or leave to stay in Russia had expired on the 31st of July. Mr. Snowden fled the U.S. in 2013 after leaking details of the National Security Agency's surveillance and telephone tapping operations. The U.S. has charged him with theft of government property and communicating classified information. Mr. Snowden's lawyer told journalists that the request for an extension has been accepted. The former National Security Agency contractor has been hailed by privacy activists for revealing the extent of the NSA surveillance operations and details of alleged U.S. spying on foreign leaders, including its allies. The U.S. Congress has since attempted to impose restrictions on the NSA's electronic surveillance activities. However, U.S. leaders have accused Mr. Snowden of damaging national interests and harming the country's security. Well, we're still talking about Russia, and two can play that game. That's another message that Russia is sending to the West after imposing a full embargo on food imports from the EU, US, and some other Western countries in response to sanctions over Ukraine. The Prime Minister, Dmitry Medvedev, said it would include fruit, vegetables, meat, fish, dairy imports, and it also affects Australia, Canada, and Norway. Russia is also banning Ukrainian airlines from transit across its territory, and furthermore, the Russian government is considering banning transit flights for EU and US airlines in retaliations for sanctions over Ukraine. Barring airlines from the airspace would significantly increase costs and flying time for many jets bound for Asian destinations. EU food exports to Russia last year were worth 11.8 billion euros, while US food exports to Russia were worth 972 million euros. And just market for food exports, that's 10% of the total, after the US, which is 13%. The European Commission said the Russian embargo was clearly politically motivated, and it's now considering how to respond. Now we end the world today, of course, on a very light note after having looked at all the crisis and everything that's going on around the world. But this story is one that is almost too cute for words. Now, did you ever know that babies engage in crawling competitions? Well, if you didn't, you're welcome.
Parents brought out their babies in competitive spirits for the 6th annual Diaper Derby, held ahead of the New York City Triathlon.
I'm finishing these heats.
In the end, 12-month-old Liam Harold beat out his twin to take the title. Liam's father jokingly said they've been preparing for the race at home.
He's been working on it for a year now. He's been working on his training. He pushes furniture around the apartment to build his leg strength.
Event organizer John Koff said it's all fun and games.
It's all fun. I mean, it's fun and games, and, nobody goes home crying for any reason other than it's time to cry, it's nap time, so it's a lot of fun.
The Derby is just one part of the family events being held for the athletes participating in the 14th annual triathlon.
I told you it was just too cute for words. Well, that's all we leave it on the world today. Thank you for watching. I'm Cynthia Ara. Up next is Sports News.